good. So how are
Sounds great.
you? Where are you in this
I'm
world?
great. I am in Santa Barbara, California.
Awesome. Oh my God. I've always
Yes.
wanted to go there.
Where are you located?
I'm in Atlanta. I'm in
Okay.
Atlanta, Georgia. I'm from Fort Lauderdale, like the beach
Okay.
area, so I miss the water.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in Atlanta for now.
Okay. Okay. Wow. So you're in Georgia. I'm in California.
We're all over the
Yeah.
road, all of us. And I
All
that's
over the
what's been
place.
so it's been such a crazy journey over the last almost 3 years because you feel like you're the only one who's ever experienced a loss, especially,
Yeah.
an absolutely profound one. And then you start talking, and next thing you know, it's like it's international, it's global, it's universal,
Mm-hmm.
it's a language that we all speak. And griever to griever is a totally different language than others. And so,
Yeah.
being in Atlanta, I've met so many moms personally. We have like a Facebook group of like
Mm-hmm.
35, I think, which is kind of nuts because you're like, there's no way anyone else has experienced this.
Right.
But yeah, and then it's then being able to have this conversation with someone like you who has done such a great job with, I don't want to say generalizing it, but you have absolutely broken down the language that we all are trying to speak regardless of our loss. So that's been really cool to connect all over this planet with different people who are speaking this language, and some of us are louder than others, hence why we're here
Mm-hmm.
having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's good to use your gifts and your
Mm-hmm.
calling for those who don't have the voice and don't have the
Yeah.
words. So I want
Yeah.
to thank you for doing this. I know I kind of
Beautifully
just
said.
jumped at you and I was like,
No,
come
I love
on.
it. Yeah, I love it. I'm so excited to be here and speak with. I mean, it's such an honor. Like, first and foremost, I know how much your community means to you. Like, I can really feel that and sense that. And I know what, like, a sacred, special thing this is that you've created. I know you take care of your people. That comes across very clearly. So the fact that for whatever reason, like my messaging, spoke to you and that you trust me to speak to your people, that means the world. So yeah, I
Thank
just feel very
you.
honored.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I don't know what it is about you. I don't gravitate a lot towards grief spaces in here. I don't know how to explain it. Like right after Brody, my first child, was stillborn, I went to the grief spaces. I was like,
Hmm.
I need, and I just didn't resonate with a lot of
Hmm.
it for some reason, but
Hmm.
the way that you put it, it's just real. It's real, it's raw, it's honest. So that our foundation of our platforms, the losses are different, but the language is the
Hmm.
same, like I said. And my community resonates with a lot of the things that you say. And I think it's
Hmm.
important for us to be very clear about grief and
Yes.
the lack of timeline and how we feel. Because I
Yeah.
think the number one thing that's the most dangerous part of grief is feeling alone
Hmm.
and not knowing if what you're feeling is normal for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And you do such a good job at that. So I appreciate you coming on and and taking the time. You know, a lot of people are like, how do you talk about death and grief? And also, I'm like, I feel invigorated after these conversations.
Yeah.
I don't know how to
Same.
explain it. Yeah.
Hmm.
So walk me through how we got here. Where you
Sure.
are a licensed therapist, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
EDMR as well, which I hope we have time to talk about that.
Yeah.
We might have to do a
Yeah.
two-part series, but you are knowledgeable by education as well as experience,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
profound and huge in this space. You don't just say, "Hey, I'm going to talk grief and I'm going to try to relate out to other people" without having actually felt it before. You know what this feels like.
Hmm.
So, can you tell me like where this all started, how we got to this
Yeah.
conversation?
Yeah, sure. So I was a pretty green licensed therapist right before COVID hit, um, and my dad got sick. So my dad got sick at the end of 2019, actually the day before Halloween. That's a tough day for me because
Oh
that's like
boy.
the call when
Mhm,
everything changed, and everyone's
mhm.
got one of those moments, the call, the news, the scan. So for me, the call is October 30th. So we got the call, everything changed. My dad was a very, very healthy. He was like one of those people that just kind of floated around the earth like untouchable, unscathed, like life of the party. Everyone loved him. It's like he's gonna live forever. Like we all knew that. He's gonna live
Mhm.
forever. He's just one of those spirits. And like I said, super active, super healthy. So this was just a shock. Not that it wouldn't be a shock for someone who did get colds or wasn't as active, but it just seemed like such a stark contrast to the way he lived was cancer and the
Mm.
cancer journey. Um, so COVID hit, my dad was sick. You know, what's interesting is you say I have this knowledge, I have the education and the lived experience. What I talk about a lot is that I actually had no education around grief. Even though I was a
Mm.
licensed therapist, we were not, grief was like a blip on the radar of things that we talked about in grad school.
Interesting.
Um, it was not seen as like this is a major trauma that everyone is going to go through. It was like, here's a weekend class where we'll share about some sad stuff and you just nod and tell people they'll get through it. Like it was very lacking. It was horrible. It was terrible. And I didn't know that it was horrible and terrible until I went through it
Mm.
myself and was
Mm.
like, oh my God, even the people that are supposed to be supporting grievers don't have the education. They don't have the knowledge base. Just because you're a therapist, that doesn't mean shit. It doesn't mean you know anything about grief as it relates to trauma. So that's part of the piece here of how I came here was that there's a huge gap between the supporters and what the supporters actually are prepared to support grievers with.
Mm.
Um, and so, yeah, his journey was quick with cancer. It was brutal. I was a primary caregiver, and so I was working as a full-time therapist, full-time caregiver, and just for the lack of a better word, it was just so stressful. All of it was just, I was running at max capacity all day, every day for over a year, um, including the emotional toll of when is he going to die? How long does he have? Is he going to be there for my wedding? All of these, it was just terror.
Mm.
And then so all of this anxiety is building, and then he died, and um, all of my defenses, you know, being the strong one, being the caregiver for others, um, you know, not surprising, I became a therapist, but you know, all of these kind of, I call it like the eldest daughter archetypes.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, you know, the one that's got it, that people come to, that has the advice. Everything fell apart. Like
Mhm.
I didn't know how to let people in. I didn't know how to control my own anxiety. No coping skills that had previously worked for me worked anymore. I felt like I was losing my mind, like I was a different person. I got really angry. I really started experiencing myself as this person that I just truly didn't recognize, but I didn't know that all of these pieces made complete sense given what I had just gone through and what I was processing and what my body was processing. And it wasn't until I got pregnant for the second time with my son, who's now 2, that I really had to face everything that I had been either suppressing or not knowing how to deal with emotionally. I had to do that for him.
Mhm.
And that is where I started my deep dive really into grief and what had happened. And just sort of the more I learned, the more angry I got at the lack of information and the lack of education. And it just sort of opened this whole world to me where I was like, why is no one like really talking about it? Not like, you know, some of those fluffier, maybe grief spaces where there's the really nice things to hear and the quotes and the validation. But I'm like, I need the
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Like, give me something to hold on to.
Yeah.
Um, and so I started making it and people started relating to it. And so I've just got louder and louder about it.
Amen, sister. And I think that's something to really analyze here. It's like, why are they not covering grief what it is? It's an overhaul of your mental, emotional, physical being. It is a change. It is a catastrophic change in your life to which the future, you're not only mourning the person, you're mourning the future that you were going to have with them. You're mourning the future that you were supposed to have, the life you were supposed to have. And I wonder sometimes why is it not looked at or analyzed or taught, and why are so many therapists not equipped to handle this when literally, like you said, everybody, if you love and
Mhm,
you lose, you're going to have grief. It's going to affect every single one of us. And
mhm,
it's almost like maybe they feel that it would be a collapse of society if we really gave in to all these people who were feeling this way, or we were, you know, taking care of people who just should just chalk it up to bad luck and move right along. For me, I
Mhm.
personally feel the more we shed light on the dark and ugly and just the transformative ways of grief and loss, almost strengthens me, almost helps
Mhm.
me to heal and move forward and become a better person and version of myself instead of the suppression. If in the very beginning, when I could not find a therapist who would work with me, I was like,
Mhm.
okay, so I'm the problem. There's
Yeah.
something, like, I should be over it. I should not be seeking out this much help. And
Mhm.
when I finally found one that was like, oh no, no, girl, this is nasty, ugly. You need all the help in the world. I'm here for you. It came
Mhm.
from a mother who had also lost her baby. She knew how it
Yeah.
felt. She was a griever herself. And
Mhm.
so it's almost kind of wild. It's the contrast, I think, to empower people with their own grief, letting them handle it the way that they need to by equipping them with information. That's the best thing you could do for people in society and humans.
Yeah.
So where did you go? You said you did a deep dive. Did you
Mhm.
seek out someone as like a mentor or another therapist, or did you just pour yourself into research? And what did your deep dive look like?
For me, my deep dives always start with research.
Mm.
So I'm like the Googler, I'm buying the books, I'm listening to the audiobooks. I'm like, give me the information so that I can process, so I can get my hands around it. I actually don't always want to hear it from someone else first. Like, what are
Mm.
your resources? Like, that's where I go. Cite your sources, and then I'll go there.
Thank you. I wish
Um,
everyone did that.
yeah. But I will say, what did become invaluable. So, like you, I had a hard time finding the right kind of support for myself. And I think also being a therapist in a small town, there was layers of trickiness to that, and me finding someone that I didn't know that had the expertise that I trusted, because word of mouth. And so I will say that that was invaluable when I did find that person, which I
Mm.
still have today. Um, I don't think and I'll say this for me personally, I just posted something to my stories about this today, but for me personally, there's no replacement for that kind of radical acceptance, compassion, that container that is so safe, especially if
Mm.
you're someone who others tend to rely on, and you're not someone who either has the tools or feels comfortable leaning on others and in really deep, like profound ways.
Mhm.
Some people have that, and I have those people, and I have those people, and still I need somewhere where I absolutely am 1000% sure that I am not burdening them, because
Mm.
that will immediately make me filter. So, not that my friendships and my husband, not that they're not incredibly supportive and are also my go tos, but when I found my professional safe space, that was really a game changer for me too.
That's
So,
so true. You can't
yeah,
just trauma dump and word vomit, grief vomit all over your people all the
no.
time. Bless them. I remember the
Yeah.
looks in their faces like, we got nothing. Like, I can't. There's nothing else we can say. And I was like,
Yeah.
time to pay somebody. Yeah,
Yes.
a lot of money.
Yes.
Take all my money. Fix me. Um.
Yes.
So tell me, okay, what is your work? What is your day to day? What does your work look like?
Mhm. Yeah, so I see one-to-one clients primarily. I also work with many couples, but I work individually as a therapist licensed in California. I have a somatic EMDR certification, which, when I went through my own grief experience and started really specializing in this area, I was finding that there was also this gap in real tools for trauma processing.
Hmm.
um, there are so many pieces, as you know, to loss that are traumatic. It's not just the loss itself, it's the guilt, it's the what ifs, it's the images that are intrusive that come
Hmm.
back to you. There are so many pieces there that someone who doesn't necessarily have that experience working with grief won't understand that all
Hmm.
of those individual pieces need to be processed by the body and need to be addressed and witnessed and acknowledged. It's not just a single event that you listen to and say, that sounds so awful, you're so strong, now what? It's multifaceted, multi-layered. And as you know as well, the how grief affects our bodies, that was the piece where I was realizing I needed other tools, and I was really curious about other tools of how to work with trauma in the body for many grievers, including myself, and I don't know if you can relate to this experience as well, even with a therapist, you're like,
Mhm,
I'm just full of dread. Like, this
mhm,
just all hurts. I don't even
mhm,
have words anymore,
mhm,
or I could tell
mhm,
you the story again, but I just feel miserable. Like, my body hurts. Like, I just
mhm.
feel like shit all the time.
Yes.
And there are no amount of words that can really make me feel better. There are no amount of words that are going to make me understand this any better. So the whole conversation around the body was something I was really interested in for myself for sure, but also with my clients. And so that's been a game changer for me. So coming back to your original question, one-on-one clients, I also do grief integration coaching. And so this is for anyone who lives outside of California. And this is essentially like really hands-on support. We have live calls 3 weeks out of the month, and then every week I'm on Voxer support. So this looks like me coaching you through using somatic
Mm.
tools. It's not the trauma processing piece, um, but it's that hands-on support where it's like, I don't have anyone in my life, or I don't have people in my life really who I feel like I can talk to about this like every day. Um, how do I use these tools? What if this doesn't work for me? How do I adjust? So that's been a really fun avenue I've gone down with a lot of people. And then I'll be opening up a group soon for grievers in the holidays.
Mm.
um, yeah, so that's what my work looks like right now, is sort of the individual, the coaching, and then now I'm trying to make group experiences accessible, because I think, as you know, community is such a huge, massive part of healing and grief too.
Oh, it's massive.
Yeah.
Even if it's just you want to vent. I had someone like, "Hey, can I just word vomit vent in your DMs?" Absolutely. Let's go. You
Mm-hmm.
need to let these emotions out and they become powerless sometimes after that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the holidays are just such a rough time, especially the first ones. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are mourning the fact that it's not going to look like the holidays they're used to or that they planned on it, but also they have this weird pressure to start a new tradition or honor in a certain way. And it's like, yo, listen, you got to just get through it, survive it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then traditions can change, and I speak for the baby
Mm-hmm.
loss community. And we're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, we need to, have a stocking, we need to have an ornament, and we need to have their names on all the presents. And it's like, okay, do all the things.
Mm-hmm.
But if you also want to do none of that,
Mm-hmm.
you're good. You're
Yeah.
totally fine. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome you're doing that. So I will hopefully have links to that later on so my community can join in
Cool.
that if they want to.
Yeah.
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 I love
I'll be
that.
hosting a free masterclass before the group event on November 4th at 9:30. So I'll send you that
Okay.
link. It's totally free, 45 minutes, and it's essentially what we're talking about. It's like, how do you support your nervous system, because you're going
Mm.
to be triggered literally constantly all holiday season. And then how do you map out your exit strategies? Like, you can incorporate them, yes, and also sometimes you might need to get the F out of like a family
Ooh,
gathering or
I like
mhm,
that. I like
mhm.
that. So so that's the thing. Like, it's not running, I don't think, from your triggers. It's not like there's words for these. There's probably clinical words for this stuff. And I have no clue.
It's all the same. Yeah.
You're not like dissociating. You're not just like say like what is it? Mask like dark humor is really not a, like digging into what you really should be digging into. I'm like, I don't fucking care. It's funny. I
Yeah.
don't whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so it's either I like that you can go in and dive in and learn how to get through it and handle your triggers, your emotions, your reactions, or you just say this is way too much. I'm tapping out, and
Mhm,
I love that. I think that's great. I
mhm,
think a lot of times people aren't even willing though to try to handle
mhm,
their triggers. They're
mhm,
just like, no, I can't do it. And I think that eventually leads to you just not ever being able to do anything or to move forward. Maybe I don't know. So I love that
mhm,
you're doing that. I think that's so cool.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
that rolls me into some of the questions that we had, if
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Because this first one was basically like the number one thing is like, how do you deal with family and friends that just don't support you and get this person put get in all caps, the grief. And I have touched on this so many times, but it still seems to be the number one thing because I don't think this is what you guys submitted, by the way. I'm not just like reading something random. I asked you guys what to ask in this podcast, and this is what someone put. So I think sometimes people don't real I was certainly taken by surprise. I don't know if you were as well, that after Brody died, I then had to deal with the loss of people, the loss of
Mhm,
like friendships and
Mhm.
family just misbehaving. And I don't even know,
Mhm.
I didn't know what I expected from people. I
Yeah.
think I kind of just expected compassion and empathy and maybe just, somebody to show up. And when they
Mhm.
didn't, I
Mhm.
expressed, "Hey, listen, I feel like this is what I need from you." And then
Mhm.
they and their response was even like worse because I had already then said, "Hey, here's what I need." And then
Mhm.
they didn't respond, and that told me where the relationship was going to go. So,
Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
you how would you suggest this, especially going into the holidays now?
Mhm.
How do you deal with people who just don't get it?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple pieces to this. One being just acknowledging that we are, and look, I get it. This is coming from like a compassionate place, and not everyone deserves that. But assuming that most people mean well, and
Mhm.
assuming that most people care about us, people are also in a system that knows nothing about grief, knows nothing about how to support grievers. They may have not gone through this themselves, or they did and they weren't supported. And so they were taught the messaging of you just move on from this. So, sort of recognizing that people's limitations are
Mhm.
always at play. So whatever is happening between you and this other person has everything to do with them and nothing to do with you or you being too much or you being a burden. So they are responding through their own lens that has everything to do about the messaging and the things that they've received and that they've learned through whatever experiences they've gone through.
Mhm.
So I like to start there. Um, and you said it beautifully. You can communicate what it is that you do need. So if someone is not showing up in the way that you need them to, or they're just missing, they're saying the wrong things, they are being insensitive, you're like, what the fuck was that? You can say,
Daily.
hey, yeah. Yes, you can say, you know when something is phrased this way, or I've noticed that when people say this, like, I really don't feel heard, or it's making me feel like you're hoping I feel better, and that's just not where I'm at, however much you want to get into it, explaining yourself. But there are ways to say, that didn't work. Here's what would work for me.
Mm.
And like you said, if they respond in a way where they're saying, no, I can't do that for you, then you do have a choice. Is this someone I can accept with their limitations and their own capacities? Capacity and care are not the same thing. And you get to decide what sort of boundaries, energy, relationships are going to help you and be most supportive. And sometimes that's not the people who we thought it would be. Sometimes it is. So it feels nuanced because, and I'll speak from my own personal experience, there are people in my life who can't be there for me emotionally, like at all. But I know that they love me and that they are operating from a very limited capacity
Mm.
themselves.
Mhm.
I have had to put some boundaries for myself around this relationship, but I also know that they are limited. And so there's the both and.
Mm.
I do accept them and I've had to protect myself a little bit in this season of my life. Will it always be this way with this person? I don't know, and I'm just kind of navigating that one layer at a time. Um, yeah, what do you think about this piece so far?
You know, here's where I'm at with this too. I think absolutely we need to, I wouldn't say expect people to not be able to meet us where we need them to meet, but we need to also have compassion for them that we are asking from them. So it's basically like just because you lost doesn't mean you can be a dickhead. Like you can absolutely tell people, this is what I need from you, and give them a little bit of grace if they fumble and bumble. But like you said, I love that you said, make sure it's well intentioned. Usually it's well intentioned. Usually that they just want you there, or they just don't know how to meet you. And you can always tell. Because then there's
Hmm.
people though that'll just refuse to do anything that they know that you need them to do. They just refuse. They
Absolutely.
they
Hmm.
they think you're using grief for the spotlight. They think you're using
Hmm.
grief for attention. They think you're over
Hmm.
exaggerating. They think you're stuck. You need to move on.
Hmm.
They think everything was meant to be and everything, it's just like, everything happens for a reason. And you're like, holy shit, no. So
Hmm.
with those people, I think are the ones that have been the biggest challenges.
Yeah.
I've had so many of them in my life. And I think I love that you said, because I haven't considered this before, that some people are meeting you with how they were met in their own
Mhm.
grief. And that kind of
Mhm.
makes sense. I think a lot of
Mhm.
people were also met with the chin up, things will get
Mhm.
better,
Mhm.
and that's how they meet you with that, because that's how they were
Mhm.
treated with their loss. I love that, because I haven't really considered that before. But it's almost like some people refuse. And I think a lot of times, especially the mothers that come to me, where they have a sister-in-law or a mother-in-law or somebody who's just basically like, I can't be around you because you talk about your baby too much, or I can't be around you because you're just so sad. And it's just kind of like, ew.
Yeah.
But that's got to be a
Painful.
reflection on them, right? That's a them
Yes.
problem.
100% it's a them problem.
Is that a
Yes.
blaring
Yes.
narcissist? What is that?
I think it's someone who is so avoidant. I mean, largely speaking, sure, narcissist could also be a possibility. Um, but so many people are so uncomfortable and cannot sit with their own pain that when they are sitting across from someone who is so deeply feeling their pain, it's like a mirror. They're
Mm,
like, oh, I can't accept that part of myself. I
mm,
can't accept that in you. So I'm going to reject the pieces of me. This is kind of like the shadow work, like the parts of me that I can't accept and that I reject within myself. I'm actually going to get mad at if I see it in you. I'm going to get angry at it or upset. And
interesting.
I've seen this, with one of my own family members after loss. He just could not, um, was one of my dad's best friends, like an uncle to me, like family. And his it was one of those relationships where it was clear that he was not, that there wasn't the care. There wasn't the
Mm,
care. There wasn't the intention of care. There was really, I reject your experience. I can't handle it. You are too much. Like that is the messaging I was receiving. I'm not doing this. And we said goodbye. And that was painful. And so that piece around like, what if people really can't be there and really don't get it? It's like, okay, do they not get it, but they love you, but they're scared, but they're trying, but there's conversations that can happen? Or do we have to grieve these relationships too? And so these are secondary losses sometimes. And that's, the piece to another layer to grief that isn't talked about a ton that needs space to be talked about, because losing additional relationships after loss, which sometimes has to happen, like with people who just cannot support us, or are actually cruel, in our after our loss experience. Um, that is further attachment trauma. Like that is further danger to our nervous
mhm,
system. That is more loss. That is more people will leave, which our bodies are already sensing after we've
mhm,
lost.
mhm, mhm.
So yeah,
Is that is so when that happens, let's say
mhm.
it's someone's mother who's doing this, or let's say it's somebody they just cannot escape. Like it's
Mhm,
so I know a lot of moms are having issues with people who are like always around, or they have to see
mhm.
over holidays or events, or it's family
Yeah.
or whatever. Is this a situation where we go back to what you said about triggers, where we learn how to just accept that they're going to be this way? We know how to handle the triggers when they say dumb shit. We know
Mhm,
how to kind of reel in our reactions because it's not going to get us anywhere. Um,
mhm,
or is it that situation where it's like you said, it's going to be kind of injury to our systems if we are around this too much? It's what do you do in that situation? Do you just kind of chalk it up and say, all right, this person's going to be a complete jerk. I know it. I'm just going to get through this. Or do you have every right to just be like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I'm done here.
mhm. Both. Yeah,
Yeah.
both. And I think you named an important nuance, which is what happens when in some way you kind of like have to be around this person. I mean, we don't have to do anything, but of course there are
Yeah.
situations where maybe you do. Like maybe there's a drop-off situation, or right, they're part of the in-laws and they're going to be there at the holidays. I think you said it perfectly. I call it mapping your triggers and mapping like your exit strategies. And so an exit strategy could be, um, after 5-10 minutes of conversation with this person, I am wrapping up the conversation and moving on. Or like, what are little strategies and little ways that I can contain my interactions with this person?
Mm.
what do I know to be really challenging? So is it when they bring up this, when they say this, when they say this? How do I have boundaries around those things with them? So maybe I have to see them, but I know when they start feeding me platitudes or saying everything happens for a reason, I know for me, because I've already mapped this out, I've already planned for it, I already know that this is a trigger. I'm going to be prepared for it. In that moment, I'm going to say that is not helpful. And when I hear messages like that, I'm going to have to take a beat and walk away.
Mm,
I know
mhm,
you mean well, but I'm going to have to like remove myself if you can't help yourself, but to say that this happens for a reason, because that's not actually what I believe and doesn't feel helpful or supportive to me. So we
mhm.
can really break down very specifically who are these people? What is the dynamic? What's triggering about the dynamic too? So it might be they invalidate me. They, try to impose their beliefs. They ask really intrusive questions. They make a lot of assumptions. So digging even deeper, what is it about this person and their interactions that are triggering? And a lot of the time, it's a lack of something that is upsetting. And so then
Mhm.
also naming who and where else can I get that? So really telling my nervous system, okay, I'm not going to get that need met from them. Where else can I get that? Is it
Mm,
from a good friend? Is it from a parent? Is it from my therapist or a support group? And so that's sort of a piece of managing those expectations with someone who's really challenging is having the
yeah,
plan, but also knowing like, I'm not going to get this need met there. That's okay. I can still have boundaries around that. And then where else can I get it?
yeah. I love that. I love that. And I think that's one thing that a lot of moms need to hear as well, in our space, is just because you start to question if you are overreacting or if you are just being too sensitive or if you need to get over it because sometimes that person who's misbehaving is surrounded by people who are kind of defending them like oh just ignore them, it's not that big of a deal, or don't let it get to you and blah blah, blah. You're allowed to
Mm-hmm.
let it get to you, you're allowed to let to let it sting. You are in control of your own reaction of that though, and I'm a big
Mm-hmm.
believer in that. So I know that mine has morphed over the last few years. Like
Mm-hmm.
in the very beginning, if someone said something like, you make me feel like I'm so blessed after what happened to you. Oh, I would fucking rage. I would lose my shit. It would take me down for a couple hours. Now I'm like, you're an asshole and I want nothing to do with you. LOL, you'll always be a jerk. And I've moved forward. It still
Mm-hmm.
stings. It doesn't
Of
take me
course. Yeah.
down as much.
Yeah.
So I think if you have people around you who are trying to say, like, okay, so scenario, let's say it's
Mm-hmm.
your sister in law and your husband is saying, look, she doesn't know any better. She doesn't know what to say. It's not a big deal. Don't let it bother you. You have every right to look at them and say, it does bother me, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to choose to not let it disrupt my peace and what I need. I'm going to find what I need somewhere else. She's not it, but just know that
Mm-hmm.
it does sting and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to
Mm-hmm.
change that by saying, don't let it
Mm-hmm.
bother you. So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of people involved sometimes that don't that side with the person that's insensitive, and you're just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like you all don't get it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean how you feel is invalid. That doesn't mean you're broken or something's wrong with you, and
Mm-hmm.
and you are outnumbered, because let's face it,
Mm-hmm.
not many people are affected by grief, and you're all in the same room by profound loss. You're
Mm-hmm.
allowed to feel however you feel about it,
Yeah.
but you are responsible for how you react to it and how you want to handle it. And I love that you can either, face your triggers head on or you just GTFO. I think
Mm-hmm.
having those options, escape routes, are
Yeah.
huge.
And
That's
it's all
so
about
key.
knowing your capacity. And that's kind of what, how we
Yes.
started this conversation is like knowing your limits and your capacity. And that's going to change over time. That might
Mm.
change from day to day. So you get to decide in this moment, looking at your husband and saying, I understand that she may have good intentions, but it's upsetting. And I am going to say something to her and
Mm.
let her know that it's upsetting. I'm not going to let it, I don't need to remove myself from the situation, but I'm going to say something. Or maybe it's, no, I actually, that's my capacity right now. I'm dealing with enough. I'm not going to that family
Mm.
function, or we'll go for 30 minutes, but then we're going to leave, and so it's really and knowing what your capacity is has everything to do with awareness of what is happening within yourself and your body. So again, that nervous system work is your body will be sending you cues about exactly where you are and how much you can handle.
Yes. That fatigue, that headache, that mental lack of clarity, that just exhaustion, that inability to keep a straight thought, that's grief, yo.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
Mm-hmm.
lack of
brutal.
sleep as well. um, okay, so this is kind of touches on what we just said. This person
Hmm.
asks best way to handle the pendulum of experiencing the highest highs and lowest lows in our grief journey. And I
Hmm.
think this will tie into what you said about the guilt that comes in because when you're feeling a
Hmm.
high and you're feeling happy, you're just crushed with guilt that you're able to
Yep.
move forward. And
Hmm.
then when you're in your lowest lows, it's almost like I got to find a way to get out of this. But
Yeah.
you feel like you connect with them by being low. I don't
Hmm.
know. What do you
Hmm.
think?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, everything you said, absolutely 100%. And I think that duality is a huge part of the work with clients that I do. So it's how do we hold both, that I have the capacity to feel this, I have the capacity to experience this, and not assigning meaning to either one. So if I'm having a high, is the story I'm telling myself like, yes, this is how I should feel, this is where I should be, this is where I want to get to.
Mm,
Of course we want to feel good, but that also, demonizes when we're in a low. So when we're in a low, it's like I shouldn't be feeling this way. How do I get out of this? We start feeling those urges to fix it and make it go away. And
mm,
once we find ourselves in that place where the low is wrong, that's when we're really suffering. That's when we get stuck. That's when we're repressing, or we have the shame or the self-judgment. And so how do we hold both with compassion and know that all of it's normal, and not have a hierarchy here, and just know that the swing is natural and it's normal. Um, Really low lows, I will say, without any context, of course, like there are low lows where it's like, this is concerning,
mm,
and whether it's some safety questions are involved in that space, or um, other measures needing to be taken, like that's maybe a different conversation. Like, of course, that those are alarm bells there. But if we're talking about lows that feel even like, okay, I laid on my couch for a week and, could barely shower, or I had to call someone over to do X, Y, and Z, or I didn't show up at work,
mm,
it's not like those things are okay. It's not okay. That's painful and it's horrible and you are suffering, and it's normal. And so
mm,
how do we, I think, just continue to normalize all of this and know that the lows will keep coming. Um, and it doesn't mean that they're wrong for being
mm,
there.
mm-hmm,
And also that nervous system support I keep
mm-hmm.
coming back to in those moments too, is like, how do you know that they're coming? And also, how do you prepare for that?
Yeah. And I think that's key to having that toolbox ready
Yeah. Yep.
because after loss, there's different things that start to happen that you wish
Hmm.
they were there for, that you're
Hmm.
missing them in certain phases of life as time
Hmm.
progresses. And then you're going to have to dig right back into that toolbox on how you helped yourself and you regulated your nervous system or whatever it may be, because you're going to need those. And I think
Hmm.
for us in our space, the stillbirth and infant loss space, is kind of like we had to develop those toolboxes in order to carry another baby for pregnancy after
Hmm.
loss, because
Hmm.
it was like if we don't figure out how to handle and understand and normalize and know what's weird and what's not, for us, then how are we going to get through another pregnancy when it's going to be quantified there like hugely? And
Hmm.
we dig back into that toolbox to get through it. And then what do we
Yep.
do when it's time for the first day of school and they're not going? And what do we do for when it's the mom and son dance later, at a wedding? Like, what are we going to do? Like, I mean, obviously with time, it's not going to be as crushing. It's going to be crushing, but it's
Hmm.
going to be manageable,
Yeah.
because you've got these tools that,
Hmm.
and I think even hearing you just say these things from a professional who's been there and walks and talks this. I mean, I'm sure after we hang up and you have clients all day, you probably still are talking about this stuff. You're probably still entwining it into
Absolutely.
your life. Like this is
Hmm.
you and who you are.
Hmm.
I think it's really special coming from somebody who is normalizing all the things that we talk about in our space too. So
Hmm.
that's really, I really love that you said, make sure that you are equipped. Let's see here. Oh, this was an interesting one. I don't know how far back your research goes, but you and I have already decided that our culture just is really uncomfortable with grief. And
Yeah.
has it always been like that? This person asked, was there a time historically or in other cultures where grief was understood better?
Hmm. What I can say is I'm 100% certain that there are many other cultures that, you know, to make this annoyingly nuanced, I don't know if they understand grief better, but they they honor loss much more. Like I know that there are other so maybe that's one and the same, but
No, no, no. That makes
yes,
complete sense. That makes complete sense. I think it's maybe they don't understand the loss, the magnitude of it, but at least they're trying to show compassion and mirror the person who's suffering from the loss, maybe.
right. Yeah. Like, do they have more knowledge of the emotional impact of grief and trauma? I don't know. But do they have huge, beautiful, extensive, community wide, massive
Mm,
celebrations and rituals when someone dies?
mm.
Yes. I mean, there are, and I wish I had like on hand where these cultures are. Um, but I know some cultures will like actually carry the physical body around for, I think, over a week, like
Yeah.
an extended period of time. They will dress them, they will care for them. I know that there are, like I said, just mass, like community wide, huge tributes. And I mean, even just thinking of Shiva, that's 7 days,
Mm,
and
mhm,
um, Dia de los Muertos, which is,
mhm.
once a year you're celebrating and you're remembering. Um, and so yes, there are other cultures that do this way, way, way better than
What
we
do
do.
you
And I
think is our
think
problem?
I think I think modern industrialism and capitalism. I
Mm,
think that I don't know, if we go like way, way back, I don't know necessarily like culturally where where our Western culture was at that time, but I do know that we have been this way for a long time,
mm, mm.
that we've been bad at it for a long time. And I think it is like a cultural issue with, or kind of obsession with productivity and efficiency and being strong, and being the leader of the world, whatever, all of that messaging
Yeah.
is. There's this, it's seen as a weakness to spend time in emotion and sadness and sorrow.
And do you think it's easier to feed pills instead of getting to the root of it and digging deep in wounds? Is that also like we want to quick fix people. We don't want to go to the dark with them. We don't want to help them dig and get to the root of
Mhm.
what's happening to see them flourish and heal. It's more like, hey, take this or do that and slap a band-aid on it and go do some
Mhm.
yoga and like
Mhm.
you'll feel so much better and like just fix people really quickly. I
Yes.
think to your point, yeah, maybe it is, showing more strength if you can bounce back and be more resilient after a loss. I think that's dangerous. I think if we don't
Mhm.
let people feel this
Yeah.
and work through it, I think that just is something that they're going to wear and unpack. It becomes heavier and heavier with time, and then maybe even detrimental later when you're trying
Mhm.
to unpack it. It's just so damaging. I think it's
Yeah.
a scary thing to do. And I appreciate people like you in the space who are just kind of like, hey, I'm cool. I'm normal. I have grief. This is legit. This is part of life. Like it's okay to feel this way.
Mhm. Mhm.
But like to your point, like if it gets to a scary point, yes,
Yeah.
we have to absolutely intervene.
Yeah.
There's a boundary and a balance to all of this, like
Mhm.
anything in life.
Mhm.
So I think to your point, yeah, I think it's frowned upon to be to feel sad and feel grief
Mhm.
and feel weakness.
Mhm.
Do
Mhm.
you think
Yeah.
more people are being louder about it now? Like, let's say pop culture, or maybe it's
Mhm.
musicians or artists, or do we just now have the platforms to see it
It's
more?
a great question. Well, I think that we absolutely are seeing a wider acknowledgement and acceptance of mental health in general. You hear that everywhere, and I know that's a reality. And I think that just exposure to other people's stories and exposure to other people's lived realities, i.e., social media and
Mm.
these platforms, absolutely, play a role in how much more it's being normalized. I think, and you could probably say this about any area, but there's a long way to go, but it's hopeful, it's hopeful that there are some of these really massive platforms, talking about loss. I think we're getting better,
Mm,
at least in this one small like corner of our culture. I
mhm.
hope.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I know. I hope me too. Because it's part of the reason, something that I really struggle with, and I don't know if you struggle with this as well, or, and I was thinking about it in the shower. It was kind of like sometimes I don't want to bring up how my son died or even
Yeah.
go and revisit the absolutely horrendous days, weeks, months after his death that they don't even put in movies because people can't handle the visuals that were going on in this home.
Yep.
And I feel also the need to remind people of that. It's a
Mhm.
weird dichotomy right now, and it's almost like if I don't want to talk about it anymore, it seems like I've moved on or I'm over it. Moving
Mm.
on would insinuate I've left him in the past and I don't want to talk about him or think about him or bring him with me. Never.
Yeah.
I will move forward with him.
Yeah.
But when I'm seen not really addressing it as much and not demanding people say his name or not demanding that he we hold the bear in the photo, like when I stop doing all those things just because I need to get to a space where I'm able to breathe and be at peace and not just consistently be diving into his death, more just living in
Mhm.
his existence. I
Mhm.
feel like I still need to remind people though of how fucked up this has been.
Mhm. Mhm.
What is
Mhm.
that? I think a lot of
Yeah.
us feel this way. I don't know if you've
Mhm.
ever had anyone feel this way. Like, what are your thoughts
Mhm.
on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're bringing up a really important piece of grief and loss, which is this, and I don't know if it's a cultural piece,
Mm,
I really want to spend some more time thinking about this because what you're bringing up is really important. But I feel just in this moment, that uh, there's this like, prove to me that you're still hurting,
mm,
prove to me that you're still grieving. It's this sort of feeling this pressure to provide evidence that we can live and we can grieve at the same time.
mhm, mhm,
And, what I might offer there is you carry this within you all the time. And whether people see that or not, and whether they get upset at that or not, again, is a reflection of them.
mm,
Maybe they're scared that they're going to forget, or they're scared that they're moving on and not honoring enough. Whatever it is that's going on with like projections and judgments that are coming at you for the way that you're handling it, you don't need to do anything or prove anything to anyone for your grief to be just as valid today as it was the day that he died.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. I think that's especially important to note that what you just said, because when people are actually happy to see you moving on, I'm using air quotes if you're listening to this, not
Mm-hmm.
watching, and then you have to be like, "Well, no, 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 no. I'm
Yeah.
okay." But it was still
Mm-hmm.
really fucked up that what happened. Like it's
Yeah.
almost like they have a relief that you are
Yeah.
better, air quote,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's infuriating because I think it would be so simple and so much better if they simply said, "You seem wonderful for what you have been through, and I'm very
Mm-hmm.
proud of you." Like it's something
Mm-hmm.
that's just acknowledge what it
Yeah.
took to get to this point,
Yeah.
and I won't want to chop your head off. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
but the whole thing, it's like, "Oh, you seem so good. You're in such a great place." And you're like, "Yeah, but this has been really fucked up." And they're like, "Yeah, well, but you got this X, Y, and Z, so
Mm-hmm.
everything's fine now."
Mm-hmm.
Stop with the buts, people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot to dig from a dark
Yeah.
place, and we're the only ones
Yes.
that have to do that
Yeah.
alone sometimes. So
Mhm.
if people,
Mhm.
and like I really think taking ownership, like you said, of your own grief and maybe not needing, maybe he's just saying, okay, I'm not going to be validated for my grief, but it's still valid. That is huge. So I'm happy that you
Mhm.
said that because a lot of
Mm.
people still refuse to validate the struggle.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that
And
sucks.
that guilt is such a big part of all of this. Like guilt is a whole hour-long conversation on its own when it comes to grief.
Mm,
But that piece of the guilt of, if I act okay, will people forget I'm still in pain? That's
mm,
that, some of that inner work, but also some of that, can we educate others and say, instead of telling me like, you're so glad that I seem okay, or so glad that am back to my old self, like all of those things that people might say of like, oh, it's so good to like, have you back and so glad you made it through that or whatever. And you're like, I still go through it every day. It's what I think about all the time.
Yeah.
Um, you could offer someone, if it feels safe, if you trust them, if there's that level of comfort there between you and that person, saying something like, um, when you say those things, it makes me feel like there's some like relief that I'm not sad anymore, that I'm not expressing myself in these ways. Something that would feel really good if you see me, happy or having a great day, is just to say like, oh my gosh, I love your smile today.
Mm,
How can you make it not mean anything about where I am or where I've been or where I'm going or
mm,
where I've come from? There's so much meaning making that's always assigned, it feels like, in
mm.
conversations like that or comments like that. And it's like, how do you just tell someone, oh my God, you're beaming today. You look amazing. You look so
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think at the root of all of this is just we just miss our person. We just miss
Yeah.
the person that's gone and we don't want them to be forgotten.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes it feels like if we look okay and we've moved on, that they'll be forgotten,
Hmm.
that that it's escaping people, that they're missed. And that's the whole
Hmm.
root of this whole damn thing. Grief is
Hmm.
love. And you
Hmm.
still love this person. And
Hmm.
and when by moving forward, I've always tried to tell my community so much, like, it's not a symbol that you have forgotten them or you don't love them
Yeah.
anymore. It's
Hmm.
actually such a symbol that you still do so much because you've chosen to continue on your life and live it the best way you possibly can. Outsiders don't get that. They really don't.
Hmm.
And sometimes we just
Hmm.
cannot be affected by people, like I say, dum dums who don't know shit about loss. Like, you just can't
Yeah.
be affected by it. It's hard, especially when it's the
Hmm.
people that you expected to show up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to your absolute point, just like if you don't show, if you're not getting something from someone, you might get it from somebody else. That is so true because I
Hmm.
found that when the dum dums who don't know shit about loss hurt my feelings, broke my heart, and didn't show up, I snippity, cut them out. And guess what?
Hmm.
It made room for those who did show up in the
Yeah.
most unexpected people.
Hmm.
And I think that's who we really need to lean into,
Yeah.
and as well as the community. Like you
Yeah.
said, community is huge. And I'm sure
Hmm.
the losing a parent community is huge, and leaning on each other is super important.
Hmm.
Do you find that you have a lot of your clients are from the losing parent space, or is it all over space?
Actually, no,
Mm,
which is interesting. So I see many clients, child loss and spousal loss,
mm,
um, uh, partner loss. So that is actually primarily who I'm working with. I won't say primarily. It might be like split up into thirds, but no, not mostly parent loss. Yeah. So I think there's I will say, I think part of my messaging that speaks so much to the caregiving that goes into anticipatory loss and that
yeah.
cancer
Mhm.
journey. I think a lot of partners find me that way as well. Sibling loss. I'm kind of all over,
Yeah.
yeah, the kinds
So
of
I like
losses.
what I like about your practice is that you are grief and you are trauma with the
Hmm.
EMDR, because I found that I have two separate therapists. I do
Hmm.
accelerated resolution therapy, which is kind of a
Hmm.
branch of EMDR. It just works faster.
Hmm.
Um, but the grief is more of a talking space, and I
Hmm.
think the EMDR is like really great to go with that. And I love that you do
Yeah.
both. Can you kind
Yeah.
of walk me through the difference between how you kind of handle the grief
Hmm.
space
Hmm.
therapists and also the EMDR?
Yeah. So the somatic EMDR and my approach to the grief space in general is rooted in somatics. Not rooted, it's a big part of it.
What is
Meaning,
somatics?
yeah, meaning of the body. So
Oh,
I
got it.
will
Okay.
always be approaching grief work, also having the body be a part of the conversation. And so what that might look like, sort of blending the two, is where are you at in your journey? Like, are you in a place where you need a witness, you need to tell your story, you need to retell your story, then you need to tell it again? Like, how do we work through these processes that really need to be witnessed and heard and validated? Or are you in a space where you feel like you've been pretty supported, but there's this like intrusive thought, or there's these flashbacks that you keep having, and you're like, I am stuck in this body trauma response and we need to go there. um so those are both pieces that I'll always sort of be assessing and looking out for and speaking with someone about. And we just kind of ping pong between whatever feels most pressing, most up for that person. I always like to tell clients, we will get to it all. Like we will get to all of it. So we
Mhm.
only need to start with what's here today.
Mm.
That might be this big piece over here, or it might be this one conversation with this friend that just you can't stop thinking about, you're
Mhm.
so upset about. So it's like, great, let's address that. Let's talk about a script. Let's find an elevator pitch. What do you need? But that somatic EMDR piece, that can be used far and wide as well. So not just those, more intense or maybe bigger T traumas. Um, EMDR can also be used for how do I want to feel in this future situation coming up? How do I
Mm.
integrate a positive experience for something that actually hasn't happened yet? So my body can sense what it will feel like to show up as the version of myself that I want to then. So it's
Wow,
really cool. So
that's
I
so
tend to
cool.
weave it into kind of everything that we're doing, but it comes with a lot of psychoeducation, a lot of consent. Like a client won't all of a sudden be finding themselves tapping in the middle of EMDR and being like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of conversation that goes
Okay,
into it
good.
too.
And all
Yeah.
this, can you do all this virtually?
Yeah.
Oh,
Hmm.
wow. Okay. You
Yeah.
about to
So
be
I,
inundated, I feel like. Because number one thing is so many moms are like, can't find a therapist that's going to help me. Mine didn't show up
Mhm.
and mine said I'm too much. It's like, what?
And
Ouch. Yeah.
that's so traumatic too. I hear so many horror stories from clients about previous experiences with therapists, and it truly fucking breaks my heart when I hear these stories because it damaging the sacred therapeutic relationship when you ruin that for someone and then they feel like that help's not available to them or
Mm,
they're afraid to ask for it or they come in feeling like they need to take care of their therapist. Like all of it does so much harm. It does so much harm.
taking care of your therapist. That is so true. I understand when therapists like tear up and like feel emotional, absolutely. But if they're sobbing controllably and you're patting their back, like it's okay, like
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Or if they say things like, I can't even imagine what
E
that was like, you're like, okay.
yikes,
You're like,
cringy.
is this the right space for
This
me then?
isn't gonna work. I have to break up with
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully
Mhm.
one day you will be able to train others to be just like you. That'd be great.
That would be amazing. That's a big goal of mine.
Yeah,
Not to be
that
like me, but to have a certain approach that seems to
yeah.
be really resonating with people. Yeah.
Exactly. Approach it
Hmm.
like you do. I love that. Okay, so I unfortunately we're reaching our time and I'm
Yep.
sure you have a
Hmm.
very busy schedule. Where can they find you? I'm going to link everything, but
Sure.
what's the best way to reach out to you?
So you can reach out to me on Instagram. So I have a lot of people finding me there with the handle and that's or at and that's grief, which is how we connected. So
Mhm.
DMs, or also finding me at riorichards.therapy.com.
Okay.
And so there you can see more about my practice. Or Rio Richards Therapy at Gmail. So if you want to just email me directly, if you have questions, if you're not into the DMs, feel free to shoot me an email and ask about services or also, I have a lot of people say like, I don't know if I can commit to this right now, or I'm not quite sure, but also do you have resources around XYZ? And I always try to love getting people at least like books or support groups. Yeah, and there are a lot of spaces that have all those great resources too.
Oh, I love that about you. Your heart's in it. You just want to help people. Yeah. For people
Yeah,
who
like let's just get you help. Yeah.
yeah. Oh my God, I love
Hmm.
that. That's so cool.
Hmm.
Well, I really let me know if you do connect with anybody from my audience. I'd love to
I
hear
will.
that because that's
Okay.
particularly what I want to do is I'm not a therapist, but I'll get you one.
Yeah.
And I and I really love what you're doing. And so thank you so much for doing this and coming on here and talking
Thank
for this
you.
hour. I think it's
I
so
love what
really
you're
helpful.
doing.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank
Ugh,
you. The way that you speak about your experience and the support, like I said, that I can feel the love that you have for the people in this space and who are in your corner of the internet. And I know that they are getting so much from you showing up how you're showing up. So I really
that
appreciate
means
you and your
so
time.
much. You have no idea. Thank you. Well, I'm not going to say goodbye because I'm going to say see you later because I'm going to be on the IGs
Okay.
all day, every day,
Sounds
hitting
great.
you up. Y'all, if you don't follow me, please follow me because I'm going to be reposting the workshops that are going to be going on. Rio is going to be so generous with her services and be so helpful over this holiday season, which can't suck if we let it. So definitely keep following because I'll be forwarding all that info. But I hope we could do a part 2 sometime. I think
Thank you so much.
so
Yes,
fun.
please.
I love
Yeah,
this.
this was
Okay.
great. And this was like just tip of the iceberg. There's so much to talk about.
That's so true. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Buckle
Yeah.
up, people. We ain't done yet. Thank you,
I
girl. Have a great
appreciate
rest of your
you.
day. I
Thanks so
appreciate you.
much.
Talk
You
soon.
too.
Bye.
All right. Bye.